The bride sat me in the kitchen at my own son's wedding, hidden like an embarrassing secret behind trays of shrimp cocktails. I'd paid for every flower, every toast, every song, yet when their eyes met mine, they smiled without shame. I smiled back, then quietly canceled it all. Sometimes, the forgotten woman holds the power to end the party. Hi everyone, I'm Jessica, the storyteller on the Family Tales channel. Here, I'll share stories about love, conflicts, betrayal, and infidelity within American families. These stories offer a deep look into relationships and the challenges families face. Stay tuned and explore with me. If you love emotional stories and want to uncover the hidden secrets in families, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our videos. She sat me by the kitchen where I watched my son's wedding from behind a tray of shrimp cocktail via a swinging door. Every flower and chair at the wedding were paid for by me. And however, I wasn't even close to being a part of it when the music started and the toast started. I remained silent, grinned, and then, with a single phone call, I destroyed the entire cake after the final bite. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. There was only a folding chair with a paper napkin thrown over the seat. No nameplate, no card, no sign, and no cordial greeting. Between a pile of discarded trays and a wheeled cart with a damaged wheel that made a squeaky sound whenever someone pushed it, that was where I was. I stood there blinking frantically for a few seconds. Thick and sour, the aroma of marinara clung to the steam coming from the kitchen doors. Something inside me twisted when I felt the oven heat against my back. I glanced down at my hand-stitched, delicate mauve chiffon dress. That morning, I had spent 3 hours getting my hair done, imagining that this day would be just as memorable for me as it was for them. However, nobody had informed me. We've made numerous seating configurations, but nobody mentioned it. Daniel wasn't even looking at me when I got there. He was too preoccupied, grinning broadly, fixing his cufflinks, and allowing her mother to give him a cheek kiss as if she had reared him, as if it were she who kept him awake every night during his night terrors, as if I couldn't afford both his grin and the rent, and she was the one who worked double shifts when he required braces. I gripped my small beige leather purse that he had given me for Mother's Day years prior, back when he still called me Mama. I had trembling hands. It was a faint vibration that I could feel in my wrists, like an electrical current attempting to get out of my fingertips. An uneasy smile came from the catering manager, a boy who couldn't be more than...
"Well, ma'am, they told you were to wait back here." The bride was trying to avoid any visual conflicts with the theme. I gazed at him. Theme? He looked at the swinging doors and winced. With a sharp thud, the silver edge struck the wall once more. Music erupted and laughter poured in from the reception hall. For example, the picture's overall artistic coherence. I took a slow seat. There was a squeak in the chair. The floor beneath my feet had a dark stain. Gravy, perhaps. When I moved my shoes, they became a little stuck. I glanced at my recently painted soft pink fingernails. Then someone dropped a cold chicken breast on a white plate that was chipped in front of me. The worst thing? I remained silent. Not a single word, as it was his day. Don't spoil this for him, I told myself. Avoid being that mom. I still thought that meant something, because I had paid for everything. I took out the program that was given to me during church.
Cream cardstock with elegant cursive. I'm not mentioned anywhere. She was escorted down the aisle by her father. The first address was given by her mother. The purse string was all that I was. The specter in the kitchen. Nobody desired the woman in the photo. Once more, the door swung. A glimpse of the chandelier caught my eye. The band begins to play. The initial dance. Twirling in the gentle gold light are Daniel and Emily. He never once glanced in my direction. I put my napkin to my lips and pretended to wipe away a fictitious stain. My eyes were burning. It was the kitchen onions, I told myself. The steam, the warmth, not the treachery. However, it was God.
and something cracked deep within of me. Silently, similar to a tiny crack in glass, you are unaware of it until the entire suffering breaks. I fixed my gaze on the wall before me. Behind a fire extinguisher was an area of peeling paint. I feared I might burn a hole through it from staring at it so intently. My anchor was that location, my main focus. A waiter serving crab puffs is the only thing preventing me from bursting into tears, because I wasn't sure if I would ever stop crying if I let it out. I inhaled deeply. Then again, my plate's chicken was now chilly. I kept my hands off of it. Dessert was eventually brought out. I didn't taste it, simply gazed at the gold and white layers. Her hues, her tiny vision was flawless. After that, I called. It wasn't long, straightforward. I didn't have to give an explanation. Only 3 easy cancellations. The flowers for the luncheon tomorrow, the remainder of the payment to the band. Additionally, the bar was open until midnight due to the original plan. I spoke steadily, be calm, managed, and I didn't feel bad after I hung up. I have no regrets. I sensed something for the first time that I hadn't felt in years. Strength. Once more, I glanced down at my hands. No more trembling. My heart stopped pounding, just a soft hum, like the reviving of an engine. Once more, the door swung. One more glimmer of light, of giggling, of the life from which I was cut off. Without me, let them toast. Now I had plans of my own. That night, I didn't get any sleep, not for a moment. In that rigid hotel bed, I lay. I'm still wearing my dress. I was staring at the ceiling fan that was spinning above me as if it would suddenly come loose and fall on my chest. It would, I half hoped. The smell of culinary grease in my hair was still there. The foul smell of my own perspiration blended with the perfume of pricey roses. I feel like shame is sticking to me like a second coat. I eventually kicked off my shoes. I had swollen feet. Throughout the entire reception, they would hurt. I hadn't dared to remove them, though. Even in the kitchen, I had to be presentable. When I sat up, it was around a.m. Red light emanated from the digital clock. Once more, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. I didn't look at it. What was there, I already knew. Daniel's missed calls from Emily. My niece sent me a message asking, "What happened?" Everyone is in a panic. On my iPad, I launched the spreadsheet for the wedding budget. For more than a year, I had been keeping it very carefully. Every dime was known to me, each modification, each improvement, every luxury Emily requested. She always smiled tightly and used that word like a satin-wrapped knife. "Hi, Margaret. All we want is something a bit more sophisticated." I eventually accepted hand-calligraphed invitations from a Vermont boutique Etsy seller as a result. The location was moved from the local church hall to a renovated barn that was decorated with vintage whiskey barrels and chandeliers. In this way, the cake went from 2 levels to 5, and the open bar added a personalized beverage selection. I covered everything. Nobody offered to share the expense. Not Daniel. Not her parents, and I didn't inquire because when I was raising him, I wanted him to have everything that I couldn't afford. I went through the transactions and scrolled. When I saw them, my breath caught. A few days prior to the wedding, 2 unapproved charges were made: a tasting events bar tab, upgrade to the dress rehearsal supper. I was seated in the rear, close to the kitchen at the same restaurant. I felt my gut tighten. I looked at the card again. My card, used without authorization. Then I noticed the message she left for one of her bridesmaids on Venmo. "His mother is taking care of everything. Better yet, go large. Vibes of a wedding." I refrained from crying. Not now. I had no feelings. After too much suffering, there's that weird, weighty nothing. As though my internal organs had gone numb. As if to defend themselves, my nerve endings had coiled inward. I grabbed the lamp and switched it on. My eyes stung from the light. I walked over to the dresser's overhead mirror. I was shocked to see my reflection. My eyes were smeared with mascara. My mouth's gentle lines had solidified into something strange. I had flat hair, the pillow crushed one side. I appeared to have aged 10 years in a single night. Then, however, something changed. After washing my face and smoothing my hair back, I sat down at the desk and checked my email. I wrote 3 messages. To the florist: 1. Cancel Sunday delivery, please. The remainder of the payment is withheld. Thank you. To the band: 1. We won't need the second performance because of alterations to the event schedule. Kindly consider the issue resolved. To the bartender: 1. Post-reception services are being reduced. Cancel the second shift, please. Don't process the balance that remains. Everyone was courteous, completely professional. But last, when I pushed submit, it was almost morning. I closed my iPad, sat on the bed, and listened to the soft hum of the air conditioner as the sky outside changed from black to bruised blue. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I wasn't upset, not quite yet. However, I was finished. I'm done being practical. The wallet is finished. Done is the last thing on the list. Let them solve it. Allow them to fumble. Allow them to ponder why the music ended, the bar stopped pouring, and the flowers never showed up. And perhaps, just possibly, they might recall who originally arranged that wedding. The female in the kitchen, the one they wanted out of the pictures. Like a faraway heartbeat, the music throbbed through the wall. I tried not to listen as I sat there in that folding chair with a plate of cold appetizers and a Diet Coke from the catering cooler. However, I was unable to resist. Every chuckle, each cheer, each glass clinking, all of it returned through the swinging door, a stinging reminder of my absence. A toast was being made, and I could hear it. A man's voice, her father, most likely, or Daniel's best man, perhaps. In order to get a glance through the door's crack, I leaned back just enough. In front of the absurd floral arch I had paid Didyland for, they were standing in a line, chairs made of gold, candles that float. The future is everlasting, written in loopy handwriting, is displayed on a custom neon sign. Even though I couldn't see the faces, I could still identify the voices. Susan, Emily's mother, in her usual tone of phony pity. Daniel, you are the sweetest man in the world. Emily is quite fortunate. Then there was laughter. Let's toast. I went cold. Susan was seated at the head table there. She looked like she was born into old money, dripping pearls and draped in navy chiffon, which she wasn't. Before the wedding, she had only met me 3 times. Never inquired about my life. I was never acknowledged for the money, never even offered to make a donation. Emily's father was standing next to her, conducting court like a suburban monarch, a loud, booming laugh. At the rehearsal dinner, the same man told me, "We really admire your perseverance. All by yourself, raising Daniel. It must have been difficult." Perseverance. As if I had climbed a mountain without working in scrubs for years to give my child a life free of hand-me-downs. Daniel was also present. Daniel of mine, grinning in an unfamiliar way. He sat between her parents as if he had always been theirs. I looked for my own relatives. Our cousin Diane was seated next to my sister Carol, who was 2 rows behind. They both turned away from the kitchen. Nobody did. The show did not feature me. A door that swung shut and a chair in the back had solved the problem of me. Someone walked right by me. A waiter, a young girl, in college most likely. She grinned as she looked at my plate, guilty and awkward. "Do you want anything like a refill?" I gave a head shake. "I'm all right." However, I wasn't. God, I wasn't. My entire body hurt. The jaw, shoulders, and feet were all so tightly gripped that it surged behind my eyes. Like a lump of something terrible that would not go away, my heart weighed heavily in my chest. I gazed at the plate below. 3 olives, a piece of brie, toast in a sad little triangle. I couldn't force myself to put anything in my mouth, even though I hadn't eaten since breakfast. A fist squeezed in my stomach. The pipe in my throat is thin. The seating chart came to my mind. Weeks ago, I had softly asked Emily, "Have you determined my seating arrangement?" She grinned. "Close, bright. Everything is still being finalized. Margaret, don't be concerned. They'll include you." I ought to have known. Yes, I was aware. I had a gut feeling that I was being controlled, moved in a prop-like manner. Asked to use the checkbook. The optics were tolerated, but never really desired. The worst thing, I accepted everything. One small compromise at a time, I allowed them to erode my role. I will not speak. No mother-son dance, as they claimed it would be uncomfortable. No pictures prior to the ceremony. The program makes no mention of it. Just a chair within the kitchen. Daniel's laughter came back to me. He used to laugh deep and rumblingly when I chased him around our backyard water system as a child. It was the same chuckle that I hadn't heard in years. A sensation rose in my chest. Not sorrow, not let down. Fury, keep quiet, managed, devastating anger. I got to my feet, moved in the direction of the swinging door. I put my hand on the edge and gave it a little push, only enough to see through once again. I made eye contact with Emily. She noticed me. She was aware of my location, was aware of her actions. She also grinned, not with apology. Not with anxiety, but in a composed manner, with assurance, as if it were instinctive, as if I belonged right there. She faced her bridesmaids once more, threw back her head, and chuckled. I knew then. This was no error. This was not a mistake. This was intentional. It was their plan. Select it. I wasn't supposed to be there. Daniel had also permitted her. Both of them had. And that's it. Something changed within me, not damaged. No, not now. Moved. I was no longer the same person in their lives. I had finished acting as though I hadn't noticed it. Give them the spotlight. Permit them to sip their champagne. They believed that I was invisible. They didn't know what I could remove. I was still standing near the kitchen door when the toast began. The lights in the reception area had been turned down. Above me, I could see string lights glowing and the gold gleam from each table's charges. Once, the microphone shrieked. Then, like a game show presenter, her father's voice echoed around the room to Emily, our daughter, and Daniel, her ideal new spouse. There was a burst of cheers. I stepped back. Behind me, the kitchen was in disarray. Clanking metal trays, voices arose, a server quarreling over the gluten-free plate at table 12. I stepped aside, pressed up to the partition. My back felt cold against the plaster. The air was heavy with the smell of heated oil and garlic. Her father continued from the other side of the door. Emily informed us as a child that she wanted a fairy tale, a joyful ending, a castle and a prince. Well, you got it today, my love. More cheers. I gasped. When Daniel was a child, he was never present. I've never mopped vomit off the bathroom floor in the morning. He never saw me reattaching buttons to his school clothes. Never took him to a chess tournament by driving miles on freezing roads. However, they were revising the narrative today. I was also removed from the edit. Once more, I glanced down at my hands. There were blotches on my fingers. The skin is thin, a little unsteady. My arms pricked at the frigid air vent above. It was Emily's mother's turn next. She spoke in a sweet tone. Practiced too much. We are so honored to have so many supporters of Emily and Daniel here with us today, and to accept Daniel as a member of our family. We already consider him a second son. One more cheer, similar like a second son. Nothing concerning me, no mention of the mother who reared him. No, Margaret. Thank you for everything. No, thank you for your contribution. No, without her, this day would not be conceivable. Nothing. I tasted blood when I bit the inside of my cheek. My feet hurt. I wouldn't sit though. Then the part I was afraid of arrived. The speech of the groom. Daniel took the microphone. He was glowing, powerful jaw,
a confident posture. I had contributed to the cost of the custom suit. In a NICU, I had witnessed his first breath. He was standing now, expanded, shining, an outsider. He continued, "I just want to thank everyone for coming." I had forgotten how deep his voice was, polished, as if he had practiced it in front of a mirror. "I'm quite fortunate. I'm the happiest man alive because of you, Emily. To your family as well. I appreciate you treating me like a member of your family. With all of you, I genuinely feel at home." My throat shut. And to everyone who made today possible, thank you. The most amazing day of our life has been today. They never mentioned my name, not once. The venue had been paid by me, the food service, the photographer, the linens and the DJ, the neon sign that was made to order. Emily stood there with her hand on his arm, and I even purchased for the dress she wore. I didn't exist, though. The waiters applauded. I remained motionless. The band resumed its performance. People began to flood the dance floor. A piece of cake on a plastic plate was brought to me. I gazed at it. Vanilla, with a raspberry filling, her fave. Raspberry doesn't appeal to me, never did. They handed me a thin gold fork, which I examined. Now my hand was steady. I recalled Daniel's request for chocolate cake with sprinkles on his 10th birthday. To purchase the one from the bakery he had indicated in the window, I put in 2 extra stints of work. When he saw it, his eyes glowed. That day, he gave me a really tight hug. The boy has vanished. A man who didn't even remember to save me a chair took his spot. I put the cake down. I held off till the dessert was finished, until people started to wake up, releasing their bonds, removing the icing from their mouths, until the song reached its ideal climax. After that, I left the kitchen, right in front of the servers, directly beyond the bar, through the side entrance. Outside, the air was still and chilly. The kind of quiet that makes your ears hum. I pulled out my phone. 3 phone calls. To the florist, 1. To the band, 1. To the bar manager, 1. Courteous. Straightforward. No need to elaborate. Things had already started to move by the time I returned to the motel. Brunch tomorrow, cancelled. A late-night musical performance, pulled. Cocktail menu and a second bartender, lost. I was silent long enough. Let them savor what remains. Allow them to sense the distance, the lack of. Permit them to inquire. If they called me dramatic, I didn't care. Petty, not grateful. I've already been removed from the narrative. I simply turned the page. The scent of the motel room was a combination of mildly metallic and rose lotion. Perhaps the tension, my skin, perhaps. The comforter underneath me was still properly constructed, unaltered since I checked in 2 nights prior, and I sat cross-legged on the bed. I hadn't shed a tear, not once. But I felt a chill go through me, not frozen, no. Things that are frozen are fragile, they break. I was becoming harder, tempered, not even the sun had risen. I took out my phone and reached for my handbag. 6 calls were lost, 2 voicemails, 12 messages. Daniel, you're where? Why has the brunch been canceled? This isn't funny, Mom, really. Emily, I have no idea what's happening. Are you all right? Kindly reply. This is really immature. I chuckled, silently, just a whiff of air in my nostrils. Adolescent. I launched the banking app once more. With the muscle memory of someone who had balanced a checkbook every Sunday for 30 years, my fingers moved. The charges remained, not authorized, conceited. My new daughter-in-law, the bride, had used my card to get her bridal party a spa day and go on a pre-wedding bar crawl. The detailed receipts showed it all. Champagne bottles, manicures, masks for the face. 8 people for brunch. I wasn't asked. I wasn't even informed. It felt torn, the trust I'd kept in my chest, like a warm, familiar quilt, as if someone had cut it with scissors while I was asleep. I went to my emails and clicked. 2 new ones were added, the florist's one. Although we regret the abrupt cancellation, we can understand. Refunds for less than an hour's notice are prohibited per our agreement. All right. The manager of the band sent the second email. When the cancellation was announced, we were halfway through the setup process. It's very uncommon, yet you made your point very evident. The deposit will remain unaltered. Okay, too. I wasn't requesting a reimbursement. It was for me, for the woman in the kitchen chair who is invisible, because the mother was removed from her own son's significant event. My stomach rumbled. I hadn't had any food since the previous day. I felt queasy at the thought of food. Rather, I stood up, opened the stiff curtains, and gazed up at the sun streaming into the sky. Orange, next, pink. Then a faint yellow that gave the impression that nothing was genuine. Then I had a memory. Back home, I had a small red file folder hidden in the drawer of my dresser, old documents, legal matters. I never threw out letters. It drew me in, as if it had been talking to me all along. I took my time packing, had a shower, removed the animosity and the perfume, dried my hair, put on a button-down shirt and jeans that still had a little lavender detergent odor, silently checked out of the motel. It was a calm drive home, only the quiet static of the radio playing unfamiliar music and the sound of tires on tarmac. It's the type of drive where you can hear your own thoughts clearly and loudly. You weren't mentioned by him. Everyone could see where you were seated. Nobody took any action. The roses I planted 2 summers ago were in full bloom when I pulled into my driveway. Not that I paused to admire them. I headed directly to the bedroom. The dresser was opened. Took out the red folder. Perched on the bed, there was a letter at the bottom of the pile under some old insurance documents and some pictures I hadn't seen in years. The corners of the envelope were yellowed. From Arizona, postmarked, a date in the handwriting of my late husband, the year he departed. Weeks after his death, I recalled discovering it. At the time, I hadn't opened it. I was unable to. It had irritated an open wound like salt, like allowing him to talk from the afterlife when I wasn't prepared to hear it. Now, though, I slipped my finger beneath the cover. The paper was thin. His writing was familiar and skewed. It was easy at first. I am aware that you never wanted to hear from me again, Margaret. However, I must tell you something. My heart began to race. My hands shook a little. I can't take the secret I've been keeping with me to the hereafter. The truth is something you deserve, Daniel. You don't naturally own him. Years ago, I learned, when we first met, Emily was expecting a child. I believed I could act as though he was mine. However, he isn't. And we never told you, any of us. I put the book down. For a moment, the room whirled. After that, they settled. I finished reading it. Sorry. Excuses. I'm sorry. Words that had lost any meaning. Daniel of mine, was the result of a sexual relationship. The kid of another woman. Like a test I was unaware I was taking, it was left on my doorway. I made it through. Thank God I made it through. Each knee scratch, every story before bed. I bought him sneakers and class photographs every night I worked. I got through with flying colors. Nevertheless, here I was, thrown away, changed, deleted. I had a fresh clarity, though. A revelation that would pierce years of quiet. I had stopped bleeding. I refrained from crying. Even though that letter was shaking in my lap while I sat there, it weighed more than anything I had ever held. There was not a tear in my eye. Why would it matter? Daniel's early years had been shaped by tears. His sneakers were purchased with tears. His asthma prescription, it was his first vehicle. When his father went, they filled my pillow, and once more as he crossed the stage at the high school. The audience never once turned to wave at me. Years ago, my tears had dried up. Now I was in possession of something else, not sorrow, not heartache, clarity. After making myself a cup of coffee, I went to the kitchen, dark, powerful. The neighbor's sprinkler was ticking away across the yard as I sat at the window. Sunday morning was just like any other. The woman who paid for someone else's fairy story, however, was no longer me, and in exchange received a folding chair behind the punch bowl. I wasn't the kind of lady who would put up with this anymore. Not like this. I started talking to the florist after opening my phone. I spoke quietly, courteous. I expressed my gratitude for their comprehension. reaffirmed that the plans for Sunday would not be required. I didn't elaborate. That was not what I owed them. Next was the band, the same tone, the same lack of discussion over the cause. The bar service follows. Hello, Margaret Langley is this person? That's correct indeed. I'm phoning to cancel the post-wedding brunch cocktail reception. Indeed, no problems. Simply having a change of heart. Thank you. Click. 3 phone calls, 3 cuts. I had the option to stop there. However, I didn't. Since I knew what was going to happen, I switched off my phone. 5 minutes later, it was turned back on. 38 messages that have not yet been read. 3 voicemails. Daniel once more.
Where are you, Mom? There was no band. What on earth is happening? Emily's mom. I have no idea what's going on, but this is really unprofessional. People are posing inquiries. Then Emily. Really, Margaret, are you concerned about the seating because of this? It's petty. We had an idea. Don't sabotage this. Petty. The word reverberated, similar to a slur, similar to a branding iron. Nevertheless, all I saw when I closed my eyes was her smirking across the reception area, aware of my whereabouts, aware of her actions, being aware that I wouldn't defend myself. So far, I switched the phone off once more. Allow them to spiral. Allow the questions to accumulate. I was the well, so let them know that the bar ran dry, that I paid the last note, which caused the music to cease, that because the roots were rotting, the blossoms never came. I did some kitchen cleaning, the counters were cleaned, the cat was fed. I hadn't felt so at ease in months.
The doorbell rang at lunchtime. I didn't respond. Allow them to knock. Allow them to sit in their own discomfort's heat. I uploaded just one picture to Facebook later that evening. Not at the wedding, not me. The check I wrote, just a photo. The account number was blurry, kept the signature in plain sight. No caption, no justification, that's all. They couldn't dispute the reality, an acceptance of sacrifice. I logged off after that, not from Facebook alone, from the sense of guilt, from the quiet, from acting as though this wasn't treachery. I didn't require their justifications, their spin, their explanations. Permit them to remain in the debris. I had no intention of saving them from it. The first indication that they were rushing was the silence, not another message, no more phone calls. There was only a weird, lingering silence, like a storm's eye flying straight over my house. I sensed it, the strain, the waiting. They were unsure of my next move.
Nor did I. However, it would be mine. I made coffee and sat by the window once more on Monday morning. No cosmetics, no earring. It's just the day and me and the background hum of the refrigerator. Since yesterday, Daniel had not given a call. The previous voicemail was brief, rigid, defensive. Mom, you truly created a commotion. Everyone is conversing. We were embarrassed by you. I'm not sure what you were attempting to demonstrate, but you went too far. When I heard that, I didn't even bat an eye, because this is the reality. Nobody enjoys saying things out loud. You can give someone everything, your time, your funds, your affection, and remain disposable. They will tell you that you are not part of the aesthetic, even if you create their entire world. I was no longer surprised by the betrayal. The thing that shocked me was how unconcerned I was now that I had ceased pleading for their acceptance. I removed his contact from my phone that morning. His. Only the name. The number was still there. He wasn't someone I had to forget. I simply didn't want his name to appear on my screen as if it was still there. I went out at about noon. Supermarket, postal service, little errands. Life went on. My cousin Diane, who had flown in for the wedding, was there, of all places, in the bakery aisle. When she saw me, she smiled, but her grin was hesitant. Margaret? Hello? I gave a nod. She lowered her voice and took a step closer. Are you all right? I looked her in the eyes. Were you all right?
I inquired, sitting back there watching me. She turned red. I didn't know that was intentional. Maybe, I thought. But no, I carefully sliced in. You failed to think. Just that. A protracted hush ensued. I apologize. At last, she said, it was incorrect. I ought to have spoken up. I gave one nod. Thank you. She appeared relieved, as if she had been set free by that little moment of responsibility. I hadn't been set free. However, it was a beginning. I discovered a bouquet on my porch when I arrived home. Carnations, the less expensive variety, wilting already, not a card. I kept them out of the house. I led them directly to the trash can instead. Afterward, I looked at Facebook. There were around 100 comments on the check shot. Old pals, co-workers, neighbors, people I hadn't spoken to in a long time. A few were perplexed, some were furious. Most, however, understood. One comment stood out. Margaret, this crushed my heart, and I've never had such a strong connection to anything. We appreciate you demonstrating that we don't have to remain silent. That was it, the start of anything fresh, not retaliation, not resentment. Strength reclaimed. Use group conversations to let them vent, let them tell their own story. I wasn't responding. I wasn't trying to explain. At last, I was going silent, not as a sign of surrender, but as command. And I was the one who was silent this time. First, the drawer. The dresser in the guest room has a groaning antique item, partially stuck. A small hip hump is always necessary for opening. I wasn't even trying to find anything specific. I had been too exhausted to sort through the ruins of a life. I did, however, find it among the yellowing tax returns and expired coupons. Once more, that red folder. The same one that I believed I had already used up. A second letter, however, was slipped inside the sleeve, so thin that it could have passed for the lining. This time, no envelope. Simply folded, once. But then again, written by hand, the same tilted scribble, the same name. The ghost of my ex-husband's signature gazed up at me. Michael. 3 days prior to his passing, it was dated. I assume you received the first letter, Margaret. Assuming you are reading this, you may or may not have opened it. I'm hoping you did. I'll save time by not apologizing once more. I have much to share with you. Something I was unable to transport. Something I ought to have mentioned long ago. Daniel was more than just a son. You were never meant to have him. Emily didn't want to keep him when she dropped him off at my door. She was 18, horrified. She requested that I place him for adoption. I was unable to. The heart wasn't in me. I told you a falsehood. He was ours, I told you. That it was an error made before to our marriage. You took my word for it. He was reared by you. You loved him as if he were your own. In actuality, though, he wasn't even that. He was the child of a stranger. How about you? In any case, you made him your universe. I'm not sure how this will make you feel. However, I pray that you know that, despite everything else I may have done incorrectly, I made the right decision in picking you. The only one strong enough to be his mother was you, because of who you are, not because of your blood. I remained motionless. The words weighed heavily on my chest, not mine biologically, not even mine by mistake, selected by someone who left us both. She gave birth to my child and then left as if it were a favor. I gasped. My knees went weak, something I hadn't felt in days. Still holding the paper, I took a seat on the bed's edge. My head was filled with 1,000 pictures. Daniel's little fists curled up on my shoulder the first time I rocked him to sleep. His initial statement, truck. I was so terrified of the fever that I drove barefoot to the emergency room during the cold. When the volcano failed to erupt, he stayed up crying over the science fair project. It was his first true heartbreak,
his chuckle upon learning that he had been accepted to college. I believed that every moment belonged to us. This boy was the center of my existence. I had become who I was because I was his mother. And I now had to accept something that should never have happened to a woman. That was never really how he saw me. I gave him something he loved. Not me, not at all. He wouldn't have allowed her to put me in that kitchen if he had. He would never have said a word. He would never have allowed me to be erased. The note was put on the bed by me. I used my palm to smooth it out. It no longer seemed like a betrayal. It was liberating. I had become a different version of myself for 62 years, one that existed solely to serve other people. Spouse, mom, supplier, ghost. But now that I had that fact looking up at me in age-faded ink, I noticed something different. I was unaware of the power I have, because I had a deep affection for someone who was never mine. And that didn't deter me in the least, because when others ran, I stayed. Because even if it wasn't etched in blood, I created a family, and I had another option. From now on.
On the kitchen table, I kept the letter open, didn't conceal it, didn't secure it, simply leave it alone, clear and obvious, like a reality I didn't have to hide from myself anymore. I walked around the house as if I had never seen it before. The walls are beige. Daniel's high school graduation pictures fading. He crashed his bike while attempting to ride inside, causing a dent in the doorframe. That dent used to make me grin. I just looked at it now. That home served as a sacrifice museum. To keep him whole, I had erased myself in a lot of ways. I nursed him in the fading armchair. I hemmed his jeans using the sewing kit. His favorite cereal is still in the pantry, bunches of oats with honey. Despite the fact that I no longer enjoy it, I was suddenly struck by it. I had no idea which cereal was my favorite. I couldn't recall the last book I'd read that wasn't a list of mandatory reading for the hospital or a parenting manual. I couldn't recall the last time I bought something for myself. I had been his mother for so long that I had forgotten what it meant to be a woman, an individual. I took a seat on the couch after pouring myself a drink of water. The home was no longer silent. It was not lonely. It seemed sincere. On the side table, my phone buzzed. Daniel once more. This time, a lengthy message, an alternative tone. I have no idea what took place. Everything has been on my mind. Emily claimed she had no intention of hurting you. If you felt left out, I apologize. If I had feelings, not because I was left out, not because you abandoned me, if I had feelings. His perception was still at play. His ease, his disassociation from responsibility. I didn't answer. Rather, I grabbed the remote control and switched the television on. The room was filled with the hum of a cookery program. Be calm, steady. Once more, my gaze strayed to the letter. I didn't own him. Not in a biological sense, not in a legal sense. However, I had been his, up until he explicitly stated that I was no longer a member of the family he was creating. I no longer felt the pain inside of me for him. It was for the self that I had given up on, to bring up a child who never once looked back to inquire, "Are you okay, Mom?" All those years, I made every one of those birthdays memorable. Wrapping dollar store gifts in exquisite ribbons kept me up past midnight on many Christmas mornings. You go sit down, all those. I'll wash the dishes. No one ever volunteered, thus I never had those kinds of days. His background music had been me, his safety net, his dependable quiet, but not anymore. I removed all of the framed pictures of us from the wall that night, not because I was angry, not with malice, because it was time to leave a temple to a motherhood that required me to vanish. I carefully packaged them, used old towels to wrap the glass. The box was labeled, "Recollections, not responsibilities." Dinner was prepared by me, only for me. I once saw a recipe on a travel program.
Pasta with lemon butter, garlic, and roasted cherry tomatoes. No nuggets of chicken. Macaroni and cheese is not served. Exactly what I desired. As I ate, I lit a candle, played jazz softly. Prepare the table for one person. There was silence. Not empty, though. The sound of getting back something I didn't know I'd lost. Myself. There was stillness when the invitation list began. No glitter pens, no gold foil. All I could hear was the scratching of my pen on a yellow notebook that was lined. One by one, I wrote the names. I didn't have to invite them. I wanted to. Claire. When I worked doubles, my old ER buddy would smuggle coffee into my locker. Henderson, Mr., my neighbor next door who consistently cleared my driveway of snow before I could leave. Dina from the bookshop I go to on Sundays, who genuinely listens and constantly inquires about my week. In order to assist me in covering a shift, Nurse Janet once remained late on her own birthday. My blood was not shared. However, each one had given me a sense of recognition that my own son had never experienced. The new theme was that those who witnessed me, there was no wedding, wasn't a holiday, only dinner at my residence, with my meal at my table, no chairs that fold up, no kitchens in the back. Over the next few days, I prepared everything. Not because I needed to make an impression, however, I did so because I wanted to. I wasn't getting ready for someone else's story for the first time in years. It has nothing to do with Daniel. It had nothing to do with atonement. There was nothing to prove. It was about creating room for happiness. For me, I chose the ingredients on my own when I went to the market. Heirloom tomatoes, garlic, and fresh basil. Not a single tray of frozen appetizers. Even a new tablecloth was purchased by me, sunflowers and blue. It made me think of something I might have enjoyed at 20, prior to the shoulds beginning to pile up around my life like bricks. I got up early on the day of the meal and listened to music as I prepared. Morrison, Van, Nix, Stevie, Jones, Nora. The scent of lemon zest, olive oil, and garlic filled my home, similar to warmth, similar to effort, similar to home. Shortly before 6 o'clock, the first visitor arrived, Claire, holding a red wine bottle and a broad smile. "Maggie, you look fantastic." Yes, I did. Hair is loose and self-assured with a hint of grey around the temples. My skin felt cold under a linen blouse. "Don't spank. There are no mascara tears in the works, only me." Then they came in slowly. 6 visitors, a chuckle at the entrance, hugs that went far longer than necessary, pouring wine without requesting permission. We sat at the table where I used to fold clothes and assist Daniel with his arithmetic assignments. Plates were being passed, forks were clinking, and napkins were being dabbed to mouths in the middle of laughter. I also laughed. I laughed a lot. Someone mentioned unpleasant first dates. Another confessed to stealing a pen from the bank each week out of resentment. And it dawned on me in between dessert and seconds. It was family. Not blood-based, but chosen, consciously. In a genuine way, I didn't feel left behind. I didn't feel in control. I didn't feel insignificant. I was in the moment. Claire held up a glass as we sat under the string lights I had put across the back porch toward the end of the evening. "To Margaret," she said, "for being the kind of lady who reminds us that you can always take the lead at your own table at any time." Everybody clinked their glasses. I chuckled quietly. And as I lifted my glass and said, "To finally being seen," I meant every word. Shortly after noon, there was a knock, not too loud. It's not urgent, but steady, as if he was aware that I was home and would wait for me to answer the door before leaving. Through the frosted glass, I could see his shadow as I stood barefoot in the hallway. "Daniel, a week has passed since the wedding. I will be silent for 7 days." He unraveled for 7 days. Slowly, I opened the door. He had the same appearance. Not really, though. The suit had vanished. The glow was the same. His t-shirt was crumpled. His eyes had dark shadows under them.
The sight of me made his mouth contract. It was as if he had practiced 10 different ways to begin this conversation and suddenly forgot them all. "Hello, Mom." I didn't respond. I moved out of the way. Let him in. He paused, then passed me by. The house was tidy. Keep quiet. The floor of the living room was bathed in sunlight. The pictures were gone from the mantel. All of them. He saw. His gaze shifted to the vacant areas. Where are the photos? I didn't pay attention to the question. "Sit down," I urged. "Be calm, flat." He sank into the armchair across from me and did what he was told. We were silent for a long time. He sighed at last, combed his hair with a hand. "I came here not to fight." I gave a nod. "Excellent." He gave a head shake. "I don't know what went wrong. Everything was going well 1 minute, and then you're canceling, putting checks on Facebook. It hurt." He didn't inquire about my feelings. He did not apologize. He desired an explanation. I got up, went to the closet in the corridor, and took out a box. Between us, place it lightly on the coffee table. "What is this?" he inquired. "Receipts," I said. "All of them, from the previous 12 months. Down payments for the caterer, clothing fittings, and venue deposits. I even took care of the additional dance floor you requested. Do you recall that?" He did not touch the papers, but his eyes searched them. I then took out the following item: the letter, the handwriting of his father. It's obvious. While he read, I remained silent. I observed his face. Confusion at first, followed by recognition, then the tint of disbelief, which crept slowly. He raised his head. His voice broke. "You were aware?" I said, "I do now." He took a deep swallow. "Therefore you're upset because I'm not." I interrupted him and said, "I'm not angry because you're not my biological son. Daniel, I'm upset because I brought you up. I put everything I had into you, and when it was time for you to pay tribute to me, I had to go up to say, 'This woman made me.' You took a seat." He cast his gaze downward. "Quiet." I went on. "You allowed them to push me into the kitchen. I spoke without trembling. You saw me get humiliated by them, and you remained silent." I was broken by that. Not your genetic material, not the cash. At last he spoke, hardly more than a murmur. "It didn't seem to matter to me," said Emily. "It would be better for the pictures," she remarked. "For aesthetic reasons, I didn't believe you would suffer any harm." I chuckled. "Chilly, short. You failed to think." "That's right." I got up, approached the mantel. One of the empty frames was held up. "A picture of your kindergarten graduation used to be stored here. You had a marker on your shirt and a missing teeth. You rushed into my arms as soon as you left the stage. I set it down, face down. I've had enough of clinging to past incarnations of you." He winced as if I had struck him. "Mom." "No," I spoke aggressively. "I'm no longer your background. Your bank is not me. You don't think of me after the fact." He turned to face the floor. He tightened his jaw. Slowly he nodded. "I apologize," he muttered. "Not enough. It's too late." I grabbed the box, shut the lid, gave it to him. "You can now have these. Grab them. Each and every receipt, every document, every reminder of the things you decided to ignore." He paused, then picked up the box. I then led him to the exit. At the doorway, he stopped, seemed to be looking for a crack as he turned to face me. A tenderness, an indication that the door may reopen in the future. However, it wouldn't. "You used to say that I was everything to you." Silently, he said. "You were." I answered. "And now I'm mine at last." I shut the door after that. The laughing filled the house. True laughing. The kind that, without you even realizing it, makes your eyes wrinkle and fills your chest.
the sort that reminds you you're alive and reverberates through the walls. The air swirled with the scent of rosemary and garlic. Carefully, the table was laid, sunflower yellow and blue fabric, plates that don't match, napkins made of cloth folded into tiny fans. In the middle, I had set a candle, not to make a good impression, merely because I enjoyed the way the cutlery shone in the flame. In the main room, my guests were chatting and drinking wine. In the corner, Mr. Henderson related a story about how once he locked himself out of his house while wearing only his underwear. They were all howling. Claire was laughing so hard that her eyes were watering. And me? I had a glass of wine in my hand as I stood barefoot in the kitchen, grinning, not awaiting a summons, not concealed by a door. Remembered, I served as the hostess. I was there. I was spotted. I brought the last dish out, plated it, and cooked the vegetables with sea salt and thyme. Someone clapped as I placed it on the table. Claire grinned and remarked, "Chef Margaret strikes again." We poured more wine and sat past the bowls. Claire lifted her glass once more, in between the second heaping and the final morsel of cornbread. She said, "I think we should toast." Everybody gave a nod. "To what end?" Dina inquired. Claire looked across at me. She said to choose yourself. Additionally, it's important to recognize when to stop giving to those who are only capable of taking. Everybody held up their glass, and at last, I raised mine as well. I got to my feet. My hands remained steady. I didn't shiver when I spoke. Every face around that table caught my attention. Those who were not related to me by blood or duty, but voluntarily, by affection, out of respect. I added, to all the mothers who were too silent, to the women who sacrificed all only to be told that it was insufficient. When the horrible house was built, those who were asked to sit in the kitchen were asked, "It's for us. Unless we are at the head of our own table, may we never sit down again." Clinking glasses. There was a cheer. I then took a seat, not behind, not hidden, not when living in exile, however, in my seat.
My location. Daniel didn't give another call. He didn't have to. The important folks were already present. Birdsong and light streaming in through my window greeted me when I awoke the following morning. No regrets. My chest isn't constricted, just tranquility. I brewed coffee. My robe fluttered softly in the breeze as I sat on the porch. I turned to face my garden, bright and wild roses in bloom. I was no longer someone's background. In my own life, I was the protagonist, and at last, that was sufficient. Voice counts. That's it for today's story. If you found it moving, don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day.